At my grandson's 10th birthday party, I discovered that the only thing missing was a place for me. I wish I could tell you it was an accident. I wish I could tell you I misunderstood what happened that bright Saturday afternoon in early June. But some things become painfully clear the moment you see them. My name is Evelyn Parker. I am 72 years old, a widow, a mother, and a grandmother. For most of my life, family gatherings were the moments I treasured most. They were the milestones I planned for, the photographs I framed, and the memories I carried with me long after the decorations came down. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual because I was excited. My grandson Ethan had been talking about his birthday party for weeks. He wanted a backyard baseball theme, complete with red and white banners, miniature pennants, and a cake shaped like a baseball diamond. I had spent nearly 3 hours the night before wrapping his presents. One was a vintage baseball glove I had carefully restored after finding it at an antique shop. The other was a savings bond for his future, something I started giving him every birthday since he turned 5. I wore my favorite light blue blouse, the one Ethan once said matched my eyes. Before leaving, I stood in front of the hallway mirror and smiled at my reflection. For a moment, I felt hopeful. The drive to my son Michael's house took about 20 minutes. The neighborhood looked peaceful under the warm summer sun. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks, and sprinklers sprayed water across freshly cut lawns. When I arrived, the party was already in full swing. Bright balloons floated above the backyard fence. Laughter drifted through the air. I could hear music playing softly from outdoor speakers. Ethan spotted me first. He ran across the yard and wrapped his arms around me. That hug alone made the trip worthwhile. "Grandma," he shouted. "You came." I laughed and handed him his gifts. Of course I came. I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything. For the next several minutes, everything felt normal. Parents chatted beneath patio umbrellas. Children chased one another across the grass. The smell of grilled hamburgers filled the air. Then it was time for everyone to sit down for lunch. Long folding tables had been arranged beneath a large canopy. Every chair was occupied or reserved with a name card. I walked slowly around the tables, looking for mine. At first, I assumed I had simply overlooked it. I checked again, then a third time. My smile began to fade. Every guest had a place. Every friend, every neighbor, every relative, even distant cousins. But there was no chair with my name on it. No place setting. No reserved seat. Nothing. I stood there holding my purse, suddenly unsure of where I belonged. That was when my daughter-in-law Jessica noticed me. She walked over carrying a tray of lemonade. Her expression remained perfectly pleasant. "Oops," she said with a small laugh. "Looks like we forgot one." A few nearby guests glanced in our direction before quickly looking away. I waited for her to call for an extra chair. I waited for her to fix the problem. Instead, she simply smiled and walked off. The conversation around me continued. Plates clinked. Children laughed. Music played. Yet I felt strangely invisible. Across the yard, Michael avoided my eyes. And standing there among dozens of people who called themselves family, I began to realize something that hurt far more than the missing chair itself. The chair had not been forgotten. I had. For a few seconds, I remained exactly where I was, my fingers still wrapped around the strap of my purse. Nobody said anything. Nobody offered to help. The strange part was not the missing chair. It was how quickly everyone accepted it. Conversations continued as if nothing unusual had happened. A neighbor began talking about summer vacation plans. Someone laughed at a joke near the grill. Children raced across the backyard, chasing a baseball. Life moved forward without me. Eventually, I spotted an old folding chair leaning against the side of the garage. It was dusty and slightly bent on one side. I carried it across the yard myself and placed it near the end of the longest table. Not beside my son, not near my grandson, not even close to the rest of the family. I sat beside two people I had never met before. One of them introduced himself as a co-worker of Michael's. The other was a neighbor who had moved into the area only a few months earlier. They were kind enough, but their presence only made the situation feel more obvious. I was Ethan's grandmother, yet somehow I had been seated farther away than complete strangers. As lunch continued, I noticed small details I might once have ignored. Jessica moved comfortably from table to table, making sure every guest had what they needed. She brought extra napkins to one family. She found another chair for a late-arriving neighbor within minutes. She even rearranged an entire section of the table so a group of friends could sit together. Watching her solve everyone else's seating problems with ease made her earlier comment echo inside my mind. Oops, looks like we forgot one. The words no longer sounded accidental. They sounded rehearsed. I glanced toward Michael several times. He never once came over to check on me. Every time our eyes nearly met, he turned away and focused on something else. For years I had convinced myself that his distance came from work stress, family responsibilities, or simple exhaustion. But sitting there beneath the summer sun, I began wondering whether I had been making excuses for much longer than I realized. When Ethan started opening presents, everyone gathered around the gift table. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder, taking photographs. Grandparents from Jessica's side were invited closer so they could be included in the pictures. Nobody called for me. Nobody saved a place. By the time I made my way over, the moment had already passed. I stood near the back of the crowd, watching my grandson smile as he opened packages and thanked everyone around him. I was happy for him, truly happy. None of this was his fault. Ethan remained the same sweet boy who still hugged me every time he saw me. The problem was not the child. The problem was everything happening around him. Later that afternoon, while guests lined up for birthday cake, I found myself alone near the edge of the yard. A warm breeze rustled the maple trees beyond the fence. I watched sunlight flicker across the grass and tried to understand why my chest felt so heavy. Then memories began surfacing one after another. A Christmas dinner where my invitation arrived after everyone else's. A school recital where nobody told me the correct start time. A family photograph shared online that somehow included every relative except me. Individually, each incident had seemed harmless. Together, they formed something impossible to ignore. For the first time, I stopped asking whether these things were accidents. Instead, I found myself asking a different question. How long had this been happening before I finally allowed myself to see it? The party finally began winding down in the late afternoon. Families gathered their belongings, children compared their favorite gifts, and paper decorations fluttered in the warm breeze. I helped collect a few empty cups from a nearby table, more out of habit than necessity. For most of my life, I had been the person who stayed behind after celebrations ended. I folded tablecloths, washed dishes, and made certain nobody carried the burden alone. Old habits do not disappear easily. As I carried a small stack of plates toward the patio, I noticed Jessica standing with two women near the sliding glass door. They were speaking quietly. I was not trying to listen, but my name caught my attention. Instinctively, I slowed my steps. One of the women asked whether everyone in the family had attended the party. Jessica laughed softly. Almost everyone, she replied. Some people just have a hard time understanding boundaries. The women nodded as if they completely understood what she meant. I continued walking without looking in their direction, but something about that comment lingered in my thoughts. Boundaries. The word seemed harmless on the surface, yet I could not remember crossing any boundary. I rarely called without warning. I never showed up uninvited. I respected their schedules, their privacy, and their parenting decisions. If anything, I had spent years making myself smaller to avoid creating tension. A few minutes later, Ethan ran over carrying one of his new baseballs. "Grandma, did you see the glove?" he asked excitedly. "It is my favorite gift." I smiled and told him how happy that made me. He immediately began explaining where he planned to keep it and how he wanted to use it during his next game. Listening to him eased some of the heaviness in my chest. Children see people differently. They do not measure relationships through politics, social status, or carefully managed appearances. They simply remember who shows up. Before leaving, Ethan wrapped his arms around me once more. "Thank you for coming," he said. Those 5 words stayed with me the entire drive home. Thank you for coming. Not thank you for the gift. Not thank you for the money. Just thank you for being there. The contrast was impossible to ignore. By the time I reached my house, the sun was beginning to set. Long shadows stretched across the driveway. I carried my purse inside and placed it on the kitchen counter. The silence felt familiar. Since my husband passed away 4 years earlier, I had grown accustomed to quiet evenings. Usually, the stillness felt peaceful. That night, it felt different. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the living room window. As darkness settled outside, memories continued surfacing. There was the Thanksgiving when I learned everyone had changed dinner plans without telling me. The anniversary celebration where my seat had been moved to a distant table. The family vacation photographs I discovered online after the trip had already happened. One memory alone could be dismissed. 2 could be explained away. but dozens created a pattern. I opened a drawer beside my chair and pulled out a photo album. Page after page showed birthdays, graduations, holidays, and family gatherings. In every picture, I saw the same woman. She was smiling. She was helping. She was giving. Yet for the first time, I found myself wondering something uncomfortable. Had they gradually stopped seeing me as family and started seeing me as a resource? The question unsettled me because I did not know the answer. But I knew one thing with certainty. The missing chair was not the beginning of this story. It was simply the first time I allowed myself to stop looking away. The following week, I found myself looking at my family through a different lens. Nothing had changed on the surface. The same text messages arrived every few days. The same social media posts appeared online. The same smiling photographs showed birthday cakes, soccer games, and weekend outings. Yet once a person begins noticing a pattern, it becomes impossible to return to ignorance. On Tuesday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an old checkbook register. I had not opened it in years. Most people use online banking now, but I have always preferred keeping records on paper. As I turned the pages, memories accompanied nearly every entry. $5,000 toward Michael and Jessica's down payment when they bought their first house. $3,000 for unexpected medical expenses after Ethan was born. Hundreds of smaller checks written for school fundraisers, summer camps, sports equipment, and family emergencies. None of those gifts had ever felt like sacrifices at the time. They were acts of love. At least that was what I believed. By noon, I had filled an entire notepad with dates and amounts. The total surprised even me. Over the years, I had quietly contributed more than $80,000 to help my son's family build their life. I was not wealthy. Every dollar represented careful saving, delayed vacations, and personal compromises. Yet I had never once asked for recognition. The realization that troubled me was not the money itself. It was how quickly my efforts seemed forgotten. That afternoon, I received a phone call from my sister Margaret. We talked every Wednesday, without fail. She immediately sensed something was wrong. "You sound tired," she said. I considered giving my usual answer. I considered pretending everything was fine. Instead, I told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she sighed. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How many times are you going to explain away things that hurt you?" Her question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, every time someone excludes you, you create a reason for them. Every time somebody disappoints you, you defend them before anyone else can." I stared out the kitchen window at the bird feeder hanging near the oak tree. "They are family," I said quietly. "Family should not require you to earn your place at the table," Margaret replied. After we ended the call, her words stayed with me. Family should not require you to earn your place at the table. That evening, I opened my photo albums again. This time, I looked more carefully. In dozens of pictures, I saw evidence of something I had previously ignored. I was always behind the camera, always organizing, always helping, rarely centered, rarely included. It was a subtle difference, but once noticed, it appeared everywhere. Then I reached a photograph from Ethan's 7th birthday. Jessica stood in the center, surrounded by relatives. Michael stood beside her. Ethan sat proudly in front of the cake. I remembered that day clearly because I had baked the cake myself. Yet I was nowhere in the picture. Not because I had stepped away. Not because I arrived late. I had taken the photograph. Looking at it now, I felt an unfamiliar sensation. It was not anger. It was clarity. For years, I had measured love through what I was willing to give. My time, my energy, my savings, my support. But perhaps that was the wrong measurement. Perhaps the better question was simpler. When nothing was needed from me, was I still valued? I closed the album and sat quietly in the fading evening light. Somewhere deep inside, a shift was beginning. Small, almost invisible, but real. And for the first time in a very long while, I was no longer certain that I wanted to keep pretending everything was normal. 2 days later, something happened that I could not stop thinking about. I was grocery shopping on a quiet Friday morning when I ran into Linda Harper, one of the women who had attended Ethan's birthday party. We exchanged pleasantries near the produce section, and I expected the conversation to last less than a minute. Instead, she hesitated. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" she said. There was an awkwardness in her voice that immediately caught my attention. "Of course," I replied. She glanced around before lowering her voice. "I hope this is not rude, but I have been wondering about something since the Party. My stomach tightened slightly. What is it? She looked genuinely uncomfortable. Why were you sitting over there by yourself? For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she continued. I thought maybe you arrived late, but then I noticed everyone else seemed to have assigned seats. I forced a small smile. It was probably just a misunderstanding. Even as the words left my mouth, they sounded weak. Linda's expression told me she did not believe them either. Maybe, she said carefully, but I remember seeing the seating chart when I arrived. Jessica had one near the gift table. My pulse quickened. A seating chart. Yes, she replied. She seemed very organized. Everything looked planned out ahead of time. After she left, I stood motionless beside a display of oranges. A seating chart. The words echoed through my mind during the entire drive home. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sun sink below the rooftops. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn mower hummed. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, my thoughts kept returning to what Linda had said. If there had been a seating chart, then someone had decided where every guest would sit before the party even began, which meant my missing place had not been the result of confusion or forgetfulness. It had been a choice. The realization hurt more than I expected, not because of the chair itself, because of what it represented. Deliberate exclusion feels different from neglect. One can be accidental. The other requires intention. The next morning, Michael called. His voice sounded cheerful, almost casual. He asked about the weather, my garden, and whether I had enjoyed the party. The question caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I considered telling him everything. I considered asking why he had looked away whenever our eyes met. I considered asking whether he noticed there was no place for me at the family table. Instead, I listened. As he spoke, something became painfully clear. He was waiting for reassurance. Waiting for me to tell him everything was fine. Waiting for me to make him comfortable. For years, I would have done exactly that. But this time was different. The party was memorable, I said quietly. There was a brief pause on the line. Not long, just enough to make me notice. Then he changed the subject. After the call ended, I sat alone in my living room and stared at the family photographs displayed on the mantel. One frame showed Michael at age 8, proudly holding a science fair ribbon. Another showed him at his college graduation. Looking at those pictures, I realized something important. Love had made me overlook many things. Love had encouraged patience, forgiveness, and understanding. But love should never require blindness. For the first time, I stopped asking whether I was imagining the problem. The evidence no longer allowed that comfort. Someone had created a seating plan. Someone had assigned every chair. And somehow, in a gathering filled with relatives, friends, neighbors, and strangers, there had been no place reserved for me. The answer arrived sooner than I expected. About a week later, Ethan had a Saturday baseball game across town. I rarely missed his games, and despite everything that had happened, I still planned to attend. Family relationships can become complicated, but a grandmother's love for her grandson remains simple. The game was held at a community sports complex about 15 miles from my house. The morning was warm and bright. Parents filled the bleachers carrying folding chairs, water bottles, and team blankets. I arrived early and found a seat near the third base line. Ethan spotted me during warm-ups and waved enthusiastically. I waved back and felt some of the heaviness leave my shoulders. For a couple of hours, everything seemed normal. Children played baseball. Parents cheered. The smell of popcorn drifted from a nearby concession stand. It was the kind of ordinary Saturday I had always enjoyed. After the game ended, Ethan's team gathered near the parking lot for snacks and photographs. I stayed back, giving the family space. While walking toward the restroom building, I passed behind a row of picnic tables near the edge of the field. That was when I heard Jessica's voice. I had no intention of listening. In fact, I nearly kept walking. Then I heard my name. Instinctively, I slowed my pace. Jessica was speaking with another mother from the team. They were standing beside a parked SUV, unaware that anyone was nearby. I know it sounds harsh, Jessica said, but boundaries have to start somewhere. The other woman laughed awkwardly. Still, she is Michael's mother. Jessica shrugged. Exactly. And if you give people a place at the center of everything, they start expecting it. My heart sank. I remained perfectly still. The other woman asked, so the birthday party situation was intentional? Jessica let out a short laugh. Of course it was. Michael thought I was overreacting, but I told him we needed to send a message. She always assumes she belongs with immediate family. For a moment, the world seemed unusually quiet. The sounds from the baseball field faded into the background. I stared at the concrete walkway beneath my feet and felt an unexpected calm settle over me. Not because her words did not hurt. They did. But because uncertainty finally disappeared. There was no misunderstanding. No forgotten chair. No innocent mistake. The exclusion had been deliberate from the beginning. Then Jessica said something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. "She is useful," she said. "I just do not want her thinking she gets a vote in our lives." Useful. The word landed harder than anything else. Not loved. Not respected. Useful. I quietly turned and walked away before either woman noticed me. Back at the field, families were gathering for photographs. Ethan was laughing with his teammates. Michael stood nearby holding a sports bag over one shoulder. Looking at him from a distance, I wondered how much he knew. I wondered whether he understood the full extent of what was happening or whether he had simply chosen the easier path of silence. On the drive home, I did not cry. I did not feel angry. Instead, I felt something far more dangerous to the illusion everyone had built around me. I felt clarity. For years, I had accepted explanations because I wanted peace. I had ignored warning signs because I wanted connection. But now I possessed something stronger than suspicion. I possessed the truth. And once a person sees the truth clearly, pretending becomes impossible. The following Monday, I opened the small fireproof safe in my bedroom closet. It had belonged to my husband before he passed away, and over the years it became the place where I stored documents too important to lose. Insurance papers, property records, investment statements. The folder containing the education fund I had established for Ethan years earlier. I placed everything on the dining room table and began reading. For the first time, I looked at those papers without emotion. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was trying to understand my responsibilities. The education fund alone contained far more than most people would expect. Every birthday, every Christmas, every year that Ethan grew older, I had quietly contributed to it. Not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted him to have opportunities. My husband had believed deeply in education, and continuing that tradition always felt right. Yet as I reviewed the documents, a simple question emerged. Was I helping someone build a future, or was I allowing myself to remain useful to people who did not truly value me? The answer was uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor, Harold Benson. Harold had known my husband and me for nearly 20 years. He was the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. When I arrived at his office 2 days later, he noticed immediately that something was different. "You seem focused," he said as he closed the conference room door. I smiled faintly. "I think I finally am." We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every account, every beneficiary designation, and every future commitment. Harold never asked intrusive questions, but eventually he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Evelyn, may I ask what prompted all this?" I considered my answer carefully. I realized I have spent years planning for people without ever asking whether those plans reflected reality. He nodded slowly as if he understood far more than I had actually said. By the end of the meeting, several things had changed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would notice. Immediately. But for the first time in years, my financial decisions reflected my judgment rather than my guilt. Driving home, I felt strangely peaceful. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just calm. The kind of calm that comes when confusion finally disappears. A few days later, Michael called again. This time, the conversation felt different. He mentioned that Ethan wanted to attend a special summer baseball camp the following year. The program was expensive, and he casually remarked that opportunities like that could really help a young athlete develop. Years earlier, I would have instantly offered assistance. The words would have left my mouth before I even considered them. Instead, I listened. When the pause arrived, I allowed it to remain. Michael eventually changed the subject. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes. That brief conversation revealed something important. For the first time, I had not stepped automatically into the role everyone expected. I had not volunteered resources. I had not rushed to solve a problem. I had simply listened. And somehow, that small act felt revolutionary. That evening, I walked through my garden carrying a watering can. The roses were beginning to bloom. My husband used to say that healthy plants required boundaries. Too much water damaged them. Too little water damaged them too. Care without limits was not care at all. Standing among those flowers, I finally understood what he meant. For years, I had mistaken endless giving for love. Now I was beginning to learn the difference. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet strength was growing, one that neither exclusion nor silence could take away. About 3 weeks later, another family gathering appeared on the calendar. This time it was a neighborhood barbecue hosted by one of Michael and Jessica's close friends. Unlike the birthday party, the event was not centered on a child. It was simply an afternoon of food, conversation, and community. I considered declining the invitation. Part of me wanted to avoid the discomfort entirely, but another part knew that hiding would solve nothing. So I went. The barbecue was held in a large backyard filled with picnic tables and string lights. People moved easily between conversations. Children played lawn games. Music drifted softly through outdoor speakers. The atmosphere felt relaxed and welcoming. As I entered the yard, several guests greeted me warmly. To my surprise, Linda Harper was there as well. She smiled when she saw me and immediately invited me to sit with her group. The gesture was small, but it reminded me how different genuine kindness felt from forced politeness. For most of the afternoon, I enjoyed myself. I spoke with neighbors, shared stories, and laughed more than I had expected. Then, sometime after dinner, the conversation turned toward family traditions. People began discussing holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, and the challenges of coordinating large groups. One guest jokingly mentioned the complexity of seating arrangements at parties. The comment seemed innocent, yet I noticed Jessica stiffen almost immediately. Another guest laughed and said, "Jessica is the most organized person I know. She even had a seating chart at Ethan's birthday." Several people nodded. Then Linda looked up from her drink. "That was actually something I never understood," she said casually. The group fell quiet. Jessica smiled, but it looked strained. "What do you mean?" Linda asked. "If every seat was planned in advance, how did Michael's mother end up without one?" The question hung in the air. Nobody spoke. Across the table, I saw Michael lower his eyes. Jessica let out a nervous laugh. "It was just a mistake." Linda tilted her head slightly. "That is strange. Because you told me that day everything had been organized weeks ahead of time." A few people exchanged glances. Nobody was being hostile. Nobody was attacking anyone. Yet the truth had quietly entered the conversation. Jessica opened her mouth as if searching for a response. None seemed to come. For years, I would have rushed to rescue the situation. I would have changed the subject. I would have protected everyone from discomfort. This time, I remained silent. The silence did all the work. Eventually, one of the guests shrugged and said, "Well, if it was intentional, that would have been pretty hurtful." Several others murmured in agreement. Jessica's expression tightened. Michael looked increasingly uncomfortable. Then something unexpected happened. An older gentleman seated nearby turned toward me. "For what it is worth," he said kindly, "I cannot imagine hosting a family event without making sure my mother had the best seat in the house." The conversation moved on shortly afterward. Nobody argued. Nobody raised their voice. Yet the atmosphere had shifted. People had seen enough to draw their own conclusions. Later that evening, as guests prepared to leave, Michael approached me near the driveway. He looked tired, older somehow. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly asked, "Mom, can we talk soon?" I studied his face. For the first time in a very long while, he was not avoiding my eyes. "Yes," I replied. "I think we should." As I drove home beneath the fading summer sky, I realized something important. I had not exposed anyone. I had not sought revenge. I had simply stopped protecting a lie. And sometimes, that is enough for the truth to stand on its own. 3 days after the barbecue, Michael came to my house. He arrived alone. When I opened the front door, I immediately noticed how nervous he looked. For a moment, I saw not the 40-year-old man standing on my porch, but the little boy who used to confess mistakes before I even discovered them. We sat at the kitchen table where I had shared countless meals with my family over the years. Neither of us spoke right away. Finally, Michael looked down at his hands and said the words I had waited a long time to hear. "Mom, I owe you an apology." The room felt very still. "For what?" I asked gently. He let out a long breath. "For seeing what was happening and pretending I did not." There was no anger in his voice, only regret. He admitted that the birthday party had not been an accident. Jessica had insisted on creating distance. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Then he convinced himself it was harmless. Over time, Silence became easier than confrontation. I kept telling myself I would fix it later, he said. Then later never came. I listened quietly. Years ago, I might have rushed to comfort him. This time, I allowed him to finish. Some truths need space. Michael's eyes grew wet. You were always there for me. Every game, every school event, every problem. And somehow I let you become a guest in your own family. His honesty hurt, but it also healed something. Not because it erased the past. It did not. But because he finally stopped pretending. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About family. About responsibility. About how easy it is to ignore small wrongs until they become larger ones. When he left that afternoon, nothing was magically fixed. Relationships do not heal in a single conversation. But a door had opened. The following weekend brought another baseball game. This time, when I arrived, Ethan spotted me from across the field and ran over carrying a folded piece of paper. I made something for you, he said proudly. It was a hand-drawn picture of our family. Crayon figures stood beneath a bright blue sky. Michael was there. Jessica was there. Ethan was there. And right in the center stood a smiling grandmother with silver hair. Above the drawing, Ethan had written 4 simple words. Our family sticks together. I looked at the picture for a long moment. Children often understand what adults forget. They recognize belonging without conditions. They give love without calculating who deserves it more. During the game, Michael saved a seat beside him in the front row of the bleachers. He did not make a speech. He did not draw attention to it. He simply placed a small sign on the bench that read reserved. When I arrived, he smiled and patted the empty space. Such a simple gesture. Yet it carried more meaning than he probably realized. As I sat beside my son and watched Ethan play, I thought about everything that had happened over the previous weeks. The missing chair, the uncomfortable truths, the painful realizations, the quiet decisions that followed. In the end, my victory was not financial. It was not about proving someone wrong. It was not about revenge. My victory was learning that my worth never depended on whether someone else chose to acknowledge it. Respect begins with seeing your own value clearly. Once you do, other people can no longer define it for you. As the sun began to set beyond the outfield fence, Ethan looked toward the stands and waved. I waved back. Around me, families cheered and laughed. The evening felt warm and peaceful. For the first time in a very long while, I was not wondering where I belonged. I already knew, and that made all the difference. A grandmother arrives at her grandson's special celebration expecting love and belonging, only to discover that she has been quietly pushed aside by her daughter-in-law. What begins as a missing seat soon reveals years of exclusion, painful realizations, and hidden family dynamics that can no longer be ignored. Through patience, dignity, and self-respect, the grandmother uncovers the truth behind the treatment she has endured and begins a journey toward clarity and healing. As relationships are tested and long-avoided conversations finally take place, this emotional drama explores loyalty, respect, and the meaning of family. Fans of family stories will connect with the powerful emotions, realistic conflicts, and heartfelt lessons woven throughout this unforgettable narrative. This is one of those family stories that stays with you long after it ends. If you enjoy family stories filled with betrayal, redemption, and growth, these family stories deliver a moving experience. Discover why family stories continue to resonate across generations. Character 1. Evelyn Parker. 72-year-old white American grandmother. Silver shoulder-length hair. Blue eyes. Warm, dignified expression. Front-facing portrait. Light blue blouse. Natural makeup. Realistic skin texture. Suburban America. Professional photography. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Character 2. Jessica Parker. 38-year-old white American woman. Blonde shoulder-length hair. Green eyes. Attractive confident face. Front-facing portrait. Stylish casual blouse. Polished appearance. Realistic skin texture. Suburban America. Professional photography. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. 1. Cinematic family birthday party in an upscale, suburban American backyard during golden hour. Long white banquet tables beneath elegant canopy tents. Colorful birthday balloons and summer decorations moving gently in the breeze. Character 1. Evelyn Parker, a 72-year-old white grandmother with silver shoulder-length hair and blue eyes stands in the center of the scene, holding a handbag. She wears a light blue blouse and has a shocked yet dignified expression after realizing she has no seat, while every other guest is seated. Character 2 Jessica Parker, a 38-year-old white woman with blonde shoulder-length hair and green eyes, stands across from her, carrying a tray of lemonade. Jessica displays a polite smile that feels emotionally distant and controlled. Guests at surrounding tables quietly glance toward both women, creating visible social tension. Cinematic depth of field. Ultra-realistic human expressions. Natural sunlight. Emotional family drama atmosphere. High-detail facial features. Authentic American suburban setting. Professional photography. Movie scene composition. Realistic clothing textures. Realistic skin texture. No text. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic cinematic storytelling. 122. Cinematic baseball field complex in suburban America during late afternoon golden hour. Warm sunlight stretches across the sports grounds, creating long, dramatic shadows. Character 1 Evelyn Parker stands partially hidden near a row of picnic tables and a parking area. Her silver hair moves slightly in the wind. Her expression is calm, yet deeply emotional, as she quietly witnesses an important conversation. Character 2 Jessica Parker stands several yards away, speaking confidently with another parent near a dark SUV. Jessica appears composed and self-assured with folded arms and a controlled facial expression. The visual distance between the two women creates strong cinematic tension. In the background, children play baseball under bright summer skies while families gather around the field. The contrast between joyful public activity and private emotional revelation drives the scene. Ultra-realistic photography. Powerful facial expressions. Rich cinematic lighting. Shallow depth of field. Authentic American sports environment. Emotional realism. Dramatic storytelling frame. Professional camera composition. Realistic skin texture. Natural wardrobe details. No text. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic family drama scene. 1, 2, 3. Cinematic sunset baseball stadium scene with warm orange and gold light covering the field. Character 1 Evelyn Parker sits proudly in the front row of the bleachers. Her posture is confident, peaceful, and dignified. She wears the same light blue blouse and displays a gentle smile filled with inner strength and emotional resolution. Beside her is an empty reserved seat, symbolizing restored respect and belonging. Character 2 Jessica Parker stands farther back in the composition among family members. She is no longer the center of attention and appears thoughtful and subdued. In the distance, a young boy on the baseball field waves toward his grandmother, creating a heartfelt, emotional connection. Families fill the stands while the setting sun creates beautiful cinematic lens glow across the scene. Atmosphere of healing family relationships and quiet victory. Ultra-realistic photography. High emotional authenticity. Professional cinematic framing. Natural American setting. Realistic facial expressions. Detailed skin texture. Warm storytelling mood. No text. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic cinematic ending scene. 1, 2.